began the morning of September 22nd at the Fort Lee Holiday Inn. Police are called there after a man is shot to death. The victim, David Taylor from Florida, was staying in room 2.
Jim Jones. Compare the names. Look, Max Biggervale. Jim Jones. That don't even add up. That's not on my level, man.
Just enough to get my room so I can ram his up, ram it up in. Right? My window was there. He tried to grab me. So when he came in the window, I punched him in the face.
Max B and Jim Jones were once closer than brothers, almost like family. But the day Jim tossed that bond away, everything flipped. Max went from being his go-to hitmaker to becoming the one man he wished he'd never crossed. From snatching his girl to wrecking his ride and turning Harlem into a war zone just to reach him, Max B wasn't joking. It wasn't just beef, it was a full-blown street feud. Charlie Wingate, better known as Max B, was born and raised in Harlem, right in the heart of the Abraham Lincoln Projects. Life there wasn't easy. It was rough, real, and full of lessons. His mom struggled with addiction and spent time in prison, so his grandma became his anchor, the one who kept him grounded. But no matter how hard she tried, the streets were always close enough to pull him back in. Long before his hooks had the East Coast vibing, the city had already molded him. As a kid, Charlie found his first voice in the boys' choir of Harlem. That's where his smooth wave began, the roots of that signature Max B sound. But no melody could drown out the noise of reality. By 18, Max was already caught up in street life. In 1997, he was arrested for robbery, ended up doing about 8 years in prison. But that time didn't destroy him, it refined him. When he came out in 2005, he stepped into the world with a sharper mind, a fresh name, and a whole new swagger. That's when everyone met Max Biggervale, a name inspired by Biggie, Machiavelli, Tupac, and Jigga. He saw himself as the mix of all three, the flow, the pain, the confidence, and when Max got out, Harlem was on fire. The diplomats were ruling the streets. Cameron and Jim Jones had Harlem on lock, no questions asked. When Max reconnected with Cam, that link opened the door straight to Jim, and from there, everything moved fast. Soon, Max signed to Jim's Bird Gang Records and teamed up with Harlem legend Dame Grease, and their chemistry was instant fire. In 2006, Max dropped his first mixtape, $1 Million Baby, and the streets exploded. His voice, his vibe, his raw attitude, it hit different. That sound was lightning in the bottle, something the game hadn't felt in years. Bird Gang wasn't just about Max, though. Another name was rising too, Stack Bundles. With Max and Stack in his corner, Jim Jones was sitting on a gold mine. Max quickly became his secret weapon, lacing hooks and verses that made every Jim Jones track sound larger than life. Songs like Baby Girl became street anthems, and everything Max touched turned to heat. But even when success was knocking, the streets were always right behind him. In September 2006, things took a dark turn. Max's ex-girlfriend, Gina Conway, told him about a flashy guy named Alan A. Plowden, a big spender caught up in mortgage and mail fraud, rolling around with stacks of cash and high-end whips. Gina supposedly told Max all about Plowden's money moves, and that's when temptation crept in. According to her, Max made it clear they could pull a quick lick and everyone would eat good. What happened after that still sparks debate, but the ending was tragic. Max wasn't physically there when things went down, but prosecutors painted him as the mastermind. Gina Conway, who was also mixed up in the street life, testified that Max sent her and his stepbrother, Kevin Sims Leardom, to rob Plowden at a Holiday Inn in New Jersey. The plan sounded simple. Wait till Plowden went clubbing, break in and grab the cash. But from the start, the job was messy. Gina and Sims reportedly got lost, missed exits, and wasted time. By the time they finally reached the hotel, Plowden was back, asleep next to another woman. Then David Taylor walked in unexpectedly, and chaos hit fast. Sims panicked and fired, one shot to the face, execution style. In an instant, a robbery flipped into a murder that changed everything. Gina Conway was the first domino to drop. Once she got caught, she spilled everything to save herself. She handed over a 169-page statement and completely threw Max under the bus. She named him as the one who sparked the whole plan, claiming he promised to the world money, loyalty, and forever if she helped. When the feds came for Max, they didn't play around. He was hit with life-changing charges, including felony murder, and locked up with bail sitter a heavy $2 million. Sitting in that cold cell, time froze for Max B. But the world outside didn't stop. Jim Jones, the same man who signed Max and built hits with him, was suddenly shining everywhere. Jim dropped We Fly High, Ballin', and the song went nuclear. It was the biggest track of his career, blasting through every club, radio, and car stereo in the city. But here's the twist. Max B claimed he wrote it. He said he ghost wrote that and a bunch of Jim's other biggest songs. While Jim was out there cashing checks, Max was locked up, fighting for his freedom and his name. After 10 long months behind bars, his bail finally dropped to $90,000, and that's when Jim stepped in, but not like a real friend would. Instead of showing loyalty, Jim allegedly used the situation as leverage. Reports say he agreed to help post bail only if Max signed over his publishing and locked himself into a 6-album deal under him. Desperate and trapped, Max had no choice. He signed the papers, Jim got full control of the wavy sound, and Max got a taste of freedom, but at a serious cost. When Max B walked out of jail in July 2007, he wasn't the same. He came out colder, smarter, and carrying a storm of resentment. He was broke, betrayed, and bound by a deal that stripped him of his future. The man he once called brother, Jim Jones, was out there growing his empire, while Max sat back watching his own wave turn into someone else's success. But Harlem didn't forget him. Mixtapes and street DVDs kept his name live like urban legend. Every time someone shouted wavy, it reminded people who started it all. And when Max realized Jim wasn't going to give him his credit or his spot back, he made a choice. He wasn't staying quiet anymore. He was coming for everything he felt was his, ready for war, with betrayal burning in his chest. He had been completely taken advantage of. Jones owned Max's whole publishing. Every hook Max ever wrote, every melodic ad-lib, every catchy line, Jim was collecting money off Max's creativity, and it wasn't just business anymore. The friendship had turned cold, and loyalty was gone, leaving Max B hurt and focused on payback. That betrayal hardened his heart and sharpened his focus. Max walked away from Bird Gang with one goal. If Jim wouldn't give him the respect he earned, Max planned to expose him publicly, holding nothing back. Not long after, Max found the perfect partner in French Montana. Back then, French wasn't a superstar yet. He was known for his Cocaine City DVDs that showed life in the Bronx raw and unfiltered. French had a murderous tension with Jim from a rumored incident where Jim supposedly spread negative talk about him. So when Max and French connected, it wasn't just teamwork, it was a brotherhood built on shared struggles. They called their crew Cocaine Wave, and it became one of the most talked about movements in mixtape history. Max had already learned that the industry wasn't built to protect him. He'd known his publishing, he had no label backing him, but he still had one powerful thing, the respect of the streets and a voice people believed in. So, like any determined artist, he went underground. Max started releasing his music for free, letting people hear what the industry tried to silence. But these weren't just songs, they were lyrical shots aimed straight at Jim Jones and his circle, and Max didn't hold back. The first major hit came with mixtape Public Domain 3. The cover told the whole story. Max standing in the graveyard with tombstones marked Millie, Jim Jones, and Vanny Joe Santana. He compared them to Milli Vanilli, the duo known for pretending to sing their own songs. In Max's eyes, Jim and Jules were trying to ride the same wave he created, taking credit for his sound. Cocaine Wave quickly took off. The streets paid attention, and Max used every mixtape to reclaim his story and remind everyone where the real wave began. But Max didn't stop at dropping music. He went straight for reputations, personal lives, and everything connected to Jim Jones' image. He wasn't just attacking songs, he was shaking the whole foundation Jim had built. One of the wildest moments in their feud came when Max released the track, She Touched It, in Miami. On it, he made shocking claims about Jim's longtime partner, Chrissy Lapkin, saying she had been involved with him in personal ways. Max rapped about the story with full confidence, laughing to his lyrics and painting Jim as someone being embarrassed by his own crew, and the streets couldn't stop talking about it. Jim Jones, on the other hand, was stunned. He didn't see it coming at all. He quickly tried to deny every part of the story, saying Max was just trying to get attention. He brushed him off as a washed-up artist who never reached his potential. He even claimed Max didn't write We Fly High, his biggest hit.
But the streets weren't convinced. Max's voice could be heard all over early versions of the track, and people started asking questions about how much of Dipset's success really came from Max B's creativity. Max was moving like he meant business, and it wasn't just words. He said there was even a time when Jim tried to trap him in a parking lot by blocking his car. According to Max, he saw it coming, so he rammed Jim's car out of the way, threw a few punches, and sped off. It sounded unbelievable, but Max proudly showed the dents in his car like battle scars, and witnesses like French Montana and others backed up his story. That only made the legend grow stronger. Then came November 2008. The tension reached its breaking point. Max and French decided to confront Jim Jones face to face. They rolled into Manhattan with their team, walked straight into the building where Jim was recording, and made it clear The streets weren't safe for him anymore. Max later claimed Jim saw what was happening and called the police for help, a move that, in the eyes of the streets, made the situation even worse for Jim's image. The feud had gone from music to real-life chaos, and Harlem was watching every move. Around that time, things got even more intense. The tension between their crews exploded at a Brooklyn nightclub, turning into a full-on brawl. Chairs were flying, chaos broke out, and police K-9 units rushed the scene. It looked like something straight out of a movie, but this wasn't fiction. It showed just how deep the feud had gone. When the smoke finally cleared, Max B had done more than just diss Jim Jones. He had turned him into a running joke in the streets. Max became a cult legend, the kind of artist who didn't need a record label or radio play to prove his worth. Even though he was still tied up in contracts that gave him almost nothing, he managed to make his name untouchable, flooding the streets with music that still gets played today. But while the beef with Jim was spreading through every mixtape in every corner of Harlem, Max was facing something far more serious, the biggest battle of his life. He was about to stand trial for crimes that could end his career for good and bury his way forever. On June 9, 2009, Max B walked into the Bergen County Courthouse, looking confident like a man who believed in his own story. His people were there with him, cameras flashing, and that same calm swagger in his step. His legal team sounded hopeful too. They claimed they had completely broken down the prosecution's main witness during cross-examination. That witness was Gina Conway, the woman at the center of everything. Gina had turned herself in and testified against Max and his stepbrother Kevin Leardom in exchange for a reduced sentence. Max's defense argued that she was just trying to protect herself, saying she was angry and twisting the story to shift the blame. But the courtroom isn't like the streets. Confidence and charisma can't change a verdict. When the jury came back, everything Max believed about loyalty and justice fell apart. He was found guilty on 9 out of 11 counts, including armed robbery, conspiracy, aggravated assault, and felony murder. The prosecution told their story their way. They said Max wasn't at the scene, but he was the one who planned the whole thing. They claimed he sent Gina and Kevin to commit the robbery so he could benefit without getting his hands dirty. In the end, the entire case rested on Gina's testimony, and her words sealed Max B's fate. Gina had struck a deal with the government. Her original murder charge was reduced to armed robbery and manslaughter in exchange for her cooperation. That deal landed her an 18-year recommended sentence, a huge break compared to what she was facing. Max's defense team fought hard, arguing that Gina had exaggerated parts of her story just to save herself and cut her time down. Ironically, during her own testimony, Gina even admitted that Max didn't actually know about the robbery plan. She claimed she used Max's name to convince her boyfriend Kevin Leardom to go through with it. The defense said Gina really blamed Max later out of heartbreak and self-interest, painting him as the mastermind just to earn leniency, but the jury didn't buy it. On September 3, 2009, Max B was sentenced to 75 years in prison, with parole eligibility set for 2042. In one moment, the wavy one went from being a buzzing street icon to another number in the system. The news hit Harlem hard. The city felt like it had lost one of its most authentic voices. While the streets were hurting, Jim Jones seemed to be celebrating from a business angle. He thought he had played the perfect move. Max was locked up, his voice silenced, and Jim still owned all the publishing rights to Max's catalog. Every hook Max ever wrote, every melody he laid down, Jim was still profiting from it all. To make things even worse, Jim started taking public jabs at him. Every time he got the chance, he threw shade at Max, calling him silly names, saying he was irrelevant, and repeating the idea that Max's career never really took off. In interviews, he brushed Max off like old inventory, something he'd once used but no longer needed to acknowledge. But Jim underestimated just how strong Max's name was in the streets. Even from behind bars, Max wasn't finished. His fans were loyal, his influence untouchable, and his spirit unbroken. He kept communication going with French Montana, DJs, and independent labels, doing whatever he could to keep his presence alive. Then in May 2010, everything changed. A judge ruled that Jim Jones no longer had any control over Max B's music career. That legal victory flipped the power dynamic. For the first time, Max finally got back ownership of his wave, even from behind prison walls. The judge ruled that Max had fully met the terms of both contracts he'd signed with Jim Jones back in 2005 and 2007. In simple terms, Max was finally free at least from the paper chains that once tied his art and hard work to someone else's pockets. Even though he was still behind bars, that contract was officially done, With that legal weight lifted, Max finally got the green light to drop his long-awaited album Vigilante Season in 2011, and if anyone still doubted his impact, the streets spoke loud and clear. That signature, wavy sound, that melodic street flow he helped create, became the blueprint for an entire generation of rappers. Suddenly, you couldn't turn on the radio without hearing a bit of Max's influence, and the way artists harmonized and how they talked about waves, vibes, and freedom. His sound had quietly reshaped hip-hop. Then came the unbelievable twist in 2016. After serving 7 years, Max's new legal team filed a game-changing motion. They argued that his original lawyer had failed him completely, that instead of fighting for the best defense possible, the lawyer was more focused on chasing a big payday if Max won the case and revived his career. This legal argument, known as post-conviction relief, actually worked. The judge decided to vacate Max's original 75-year sentence, giving him a chance to rewrite his future. Soon after, Max agreed to a plea deal, pleading guilty to aggravated manslaughter. That deal changed everything. It cut 55 years off his time, dropping it down to 20 years, then later reduced again to 12. And since Max had already served several years by that point, his release was finally on the horizon. The man everyone thought would never see freedom again suddenly had hope. Max B wasn't destined to die in prison after all. His official release date was set for November 9th, 2025. The wave was coming back, and the streets were waiting for the return of Harlem's waviest legend. By this point, Max B wasn't just a rapper, he was a living legend, a myth whispered through every corner of hip-hop. His influence stretched from underground freestyles all the way to the biggest stages in the world. Even major stars were echoing his sound. His wavy style had become part of the culture itself. When Kanye West tried to title his album Waves in 2016, the entire wave community spoke up fast, reminding him who started the movement. Kanye eventually showed respect, publicly acknowledging Max B and even featuring his voice on a track. Artists like Drake and Wiz Khalifa openly credited Max as an inspiration, proving that his influence ran deep through a new generation of artists. Even Jim Jones, in one rare honest moment, admitted something the streets already knew. Max B could have been bigger than Drake if he hadn't gone to prison. That statement alone showed how powerful Max's wave was. Now, as 2025 approaches, one big question still floats in the air. Are Max and Jim still enemies, or have they finally let it go? From behind bars, Max spoke with a calm energy that no one expected. He said he was a new man, a husband, a father of 4, and focused on peace instead of old grudges. The anger was gone, replaced with growth and reflection. He even hinted that maybe one day he and Jim could finally make peace. But Jim wasn't exactly on the same page. Even though he and French Montana had rekindled their friendship and worked together again in 2023, Jim made it clear Max was still a different situation. He said he didn't wish Max harm, but he wasn't trying to get too close either. The story of Max B isn't just about beef, it's about talent, loyalty, pain, and redemption. And with his freedom right around the corner, one thing's for sure, the wave is far from over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Max B and Jim Jones will ever make peace? Like, share, and subscribe for more wild hip-hop stories just like this one.